Welcome to the Down South Hunting Podcast. This is Adam Cruz, episode number 28. Usually I am accompanied by Mike Higman. Mike could not make it tonight. We are releasing this a little bit before we had planned to. This is the week of the National Wild Turkey Federation, so we know a lot of turkey hunters are on their way to Nashville as I speak or as you are listening to this. We just thought that after this episode, we had some turkey hunting gold. Really feel like it's a ton of good information from Andy Gagliano from the Turkey Hunter podcast, and we just really wanted to get that into your hands. Before we get into the podcast, let's hit a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, if you're not following us on social media, hit us up on Facebook at Down South Hunt. Follow us there. Our Facebook group, Hunting in the South, is just a phenomenal place to hang out and to talk and meet other hunters from the southern states. Really encourage you to go there. Last but definitely not least, go check out Mike's website, huntinggeardeals.com. That is the place to go to find hunting gear at very discounted prices. You'll be happy with the products you find. You'll get it from reputable places like Bass Pro, Amazon, Sportsman's Guide. You know, I've made multiple orders there, and I have been happy with everything that I've received and saved a lot of money. So definitely go check that out. Without further ado, let's get on Andy Gagliano. Tonight we have a very special guest to kick off turkey season. We have Andy Gagliano from the Turkey Hunter podcast. Andy, thanks for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
I'm very well. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I cannot complain. It's almost turkey season.
I'm glad to be on here. I appreciate you guys inviting me, and I'm just going to apologize in advance.
Yeah.
I apologize.
I'm not sure if you ever listened to our podcast before. Yeah. You're kind of giving yourself away here that you're not a listener if you're apologizing already.
That's very true.
I don't know. I wouldn't go that far.
How's your deer season went up to this point?
Yeah, we have until Saturday, and it looks like it's going to be pretty wet between now and then. So I'm not real sure if I'm going to hit the woods again or not, but my deer season has been productive in the respect that I've got a lot of meat in the freezer, but unproductive in the respect that I've made no trips to the taxidermist. So the other thing about deer season for me right now is that I'm ready for it to be over. And you don't hear very many hunters say that, but I'm ready for it to be over because when it ends, that means that my time of year is right around the corner. So I start to get fired up this time of year and fired up about things other than hunting deer.
So I got a quick question before we get into tactics coming up. Do you do any fall turkey hunting?
That's a good question. And the answer is no, I have not done any fall turkey hunting. I take that back. I have fall turkey hunted, but I do not regularly fall turkey hunt, and I can count the number of times that I have fall turkey hunted on probably half of one hand. So it is something that I'd like to do more of. I just haven't done it. You know, I just, one of those things I have to make it a priority and get it done.
So if you're in the deer stand archery hunting and a nice tom walks by, are you shooting it with your bow from a tree stand?
In Alabama, absolutely not. Because
it's illegal?
It would be illegal in all but 5 or 6 counties.
Okay.
And if I were in another state hunting, no, I would not. Because I am deer hunting if I'm in a tree stand with a bow in my hand. I'm not turkey hunting. And I know that sounds silly because I would shoot a hog if it came by, and I'm not hog hunting, or a coyote, and I'm not coyote hunting. But if I'm going to kill a turkey, I want to be turkey hunting.
You're a purist, aren't you?
I am absolutely 100% not a purist.
In my definition, you would be a purist then, but I guess not in yours.
Well, you know, I've got this saying. I say that there are two kind of people in this world. There's killers and there's everybody else. And I've always considered myself to be a killer, but I may have to now throw you in that group ahead of me.
Well,
because
would you reap a turkey then?
absolutely.
Okay.
I have in the past, and I pray that I get the opportunity to do it again.
That's a lot of fun. Yes.
It's a blast. It's awesome. So my whole thing with the purists is, unless you're going to strip down into a loincloth, rub yourself down with mud, put on some leather deerskin moccasins, grab you a branch off a hickory tree, whittle it down into a bow, get some ligaments and tendons from a deer, and get those spun into a bowstring, get you some more branches from a hickory tree, and scrape those and whittle those down into arrows, get you some flint to make some arrowheads, and of course you're going to have to borrow somebody else's turkey feathers to make feathers for fletching. I don't care what you do, you're not a turkey hunting purist.
Andy, I don't know how you did this, but you just described to a T how I hunt.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad I finally know someone like that then.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for soundbite material, and now you just gave me like 30 seconds of gold, so thanks.
Yeah.
Well, you're welcome. No, I'm serious about that, because, you know, when I'm turkey hunting, I go out there to try my hardest to harvest a turkey. And sometimes I work my absolute rear end off and don't get the opportunity. I mean, I'm not even in the city where the game is being played, much less in the ballpark where the game's being played. And so when I get that opportunity to either A, reap a turkey, or B, to bushwhack one, or C, to stalk one and get into position of where that turkey is going and take it that way, I'm going to take that. I'm going to take those opportunities. I've been beaten too many times, and I know how hard it is to kill a turkey. And if the big man up above wants to give me a layup, I'm going to take the shot. And so, you know, it goes back to what I said. There's two kind of people in this world. There's killers and there's everybody else. Don't be everybody else.
Amen. That was good. But some of the best turkey hunting advice that anyone has ever given me was actually you on a podcast. And I've heard you say it a few times. You've always said, get one tree closer. If you think you're close enough, get one tree closer. And I think that also goes into that whole killer aspect, is just, you know, you got to be aggressive.
That's exactly right. You do. And you know, that was one piece of advice that I got that really turned my success ratio around. And now, granted, it's not near what I would hope that it will be one day, but that one piece of advice, it eliminates so many obstacles that come up in a turkey hunt. It gets us closer to the turkey so that there's less of a chance for a hen to intercept us. It gets us closer to the turkey so that we can physically see what's between us and the turkey. If there's a drainage ditch or a little rock outcropping, whatever it happens to be, a blowdown, whatever it happens to be, anything that would obstruct that turkey from coming into us, it gives less of an opportunity for a coyote to intercept that turkey, or a bobcat. I mean, there's just so many things that get in the way of a turkey coming into us, that by getting one step closer, or one tree closer, I should say, to that turkey, just increases our odds of success tenfold. And, you know, that was huge for me. And when I first started turkey hunting, I was always, in the back of my mind, it had just been planted in my head of, hey, a turkey can see you blink from 100 yards away. Well, the turkey can see you blink from 100 yards away if there's nothing between you and the turkey. But if you're hunting in the South, there's going to be something between you and the turkey at 100 yards. And so blink, take that chance. Get a tree closer. If you bust the bird off the roost, or if you bust the bird off the ridge that he's on, go find another one. Or here's an even better tip that I've had pay off for me a couple of times in the past 2 or 3 years. Don't give up on that bird. Sit still and wait. Wait 30 minutes or wait an hour. You'll be surprised at how many times that gobbler will start gobbling again. Just because you spooked him from a distance, you didn't spook him from up close. And he's in the business of gobbling and calling in hens in the springtime. He doesn't want to be out of business for long. So even if you spook him, you may not have really spooked him. Get closer, get a tree closer.
Let's back up a little bit, and I'd like for you to tell us about how you got into turkey hunting and hunting altogether.
So my dad introduced me to the sport of hunting, and I was very young. I would say I probably was 5, maybe 6 years old. I remember going on a couple of dove hunts with him, and then a year or 2 years later, I went on my first deer hunt with him. All I was interested in at that age was getting me a nap. And so, well, all right, I may have told a little story. All I was interested in at that age and at my age now is getting a little nap. So we would go into the woods to deer hunt, and he would lay out the gun cases for me to lay down on the ground. And it worked great for him because if I'm asleep, I'm not moving around and I'm not aggravating him by asking him 100 questions. And I can't tell you how many times I was awakened to a gunshot or awakened by a gunshot because he was able to get a deer because I was laying on the ground asleep and still. But he introduced me to hunting at an early age. We hunted deer and doves primarily. My dad was in the nursery and landscaping business. So in the springs, we were always working. He was always working, especially. So that meant that I never got into the woods in the spring. And so I never grew up turkey hunting. And I actually started turkey hunting. Well, a buddy of mine and I went for the first time, each of us, our first time, when we were freshmen in college at Alabama. And we actually heard turkeys gobble that day, but we didn't know what we were doing. Didn't have the slightest clue what we were doing. We were just in the woods. So we heard turkeys gobble. And it was okay to me. I always enjoyed being in the woods. So I got enjoyment out of that. Now he went all in from that day on. For me, it took about 3 years. And I actually had killed 2 turkeys that he called one of them in for me, and another buddy of mine called one in for me. But I killed 2 turkeys before I really just got bit by the bug so bad. And the bird that got me bit by the bug so bad was a turkey that I called in myself on public land in Alabama when I shouldn't have even been in the woods. It was a joke that I was even out in the woods by myself with a turkey call in my hand. But all you have to do is find the right bird at the right time. And so from there, it's all downhill for me. That was I'd been out of college at that point, maybe, I know when it was. It was my second spring out of college that I called that bird in. So I was 24 years old, roughly. And from there, it's just been all downhill since then.
Now, since you've started turkey hunting, we all kind of go through this phase of being a beginner, and I don't think any turkey hunter would ever say they become an expert. But when do you think you made that transition from being a beginner to being an adequate turkey killer? How long did that take you, and what really triggered that transition? Was it a mentor? Was it something that happened in the woods that tripped that trigger for you to figure this thing out? What happened there?
So that's another great question. Man, you've got some good questions. You're just going to have to start writing questions for my podcast interviews from now on. like I said, I was 24 when I called in and killed my first bird myself. I went not religiously, but from that point for probably the next 3 or 4 years, I went turkey hunting maybe 4 or 5 times a year. And then, so that gets me up to my late 20s. I started going about every weekend, and I would go a couple of weeks before season to scout. And so really about the time I was 28, 29, 30 years old is when I started really kind of putting in the time and the effort and the energy to really take the sport on and get it, go with it. So I had a major change in my life at the age of 30, and that was I got divorced. And when I got divorced, all of a sudden, I had a lot of free time.
Man, don't tell me that. Just kidding, baby.
And my wife is downstairs now, and I know she tunes me out, so she's not hearing any of this. But that free time in the spring, I threw into turkey hunting. That free time every other part of the year, I threw into work. And so it made me, because I worked so much with all that free time that I had, when the springtime rolled around, it made me want to turkey hunt even that much more because I got some time to enjoy to myself doing something other than sitting in my office working. So it was about that age that I started going almost every single day of the season. And Alabama season runs usually from March the 15th until April the 30th. So you're talking about 46 days. And about the age of 30, 31, 32, from then on, I don't think I've missed more than 5 or 6 days out of Alabama season in any given year. In addition to that, I started tacking on days by going to visit other states. And my first goal there was to kill a Grand Slam, which I did at, I was 32 or 33 when I killed my Grand Slam. And when I finished my Grand Slam, it was kind of like, okay, what's next? So my buddies and I that I had gone and completed the Grand Slam with were like, well, we don't want to stop these trips. They're fun. And I said, well, let's kill a turkey in every state. So we started on that journey. But to go back, I'm down a rabbit hole now. To get back to the point of where was it for me in my turkey hunting career that I started consistently killing turkeys, and what was it in my career that got me to that point? So I started consistently killing turkeys at about that age of 30, 31, about the time that I really was going almost every single day of the season. That's one of the reasons why I started killing turkeys consistently, is because I was going almost every single day. And what happens with most people, I think, is that when we make a mistake doing X, if we don't do X again until this time next year, there's a real good chance we're going to make that same mistake again. But when you do X every single day, and you do that over a period of time every single day, you're less and less likely to make that same mistake. And so I started slowly whittling down these mistakes and these errors that I was making and repeating every season, because I was only going a few times a year to the turkey woods. And I started whittling those away. Those things got ingrained in my memory, and I started committing fewer and fewer of those mistakes as I went along. There were actually 2 pieces of advice that I got that really helped to turn things around for me. One of them we've already spoken about, and that is get as close as you think you can get to that turkey that's gobbling, and then get one tree closer. And that was huge for me. And it was tough to do the first couple of times. But after I did it, I realized this works. This is gold. So I got that piece of advice from a turkey hunting buddy of mine who actually got the piece of advice from another older turkey hunter while my buddy was guiding him on a guided turkey hunt. And that was for an outfitter here in Alabama that he was working for at the time. So I took that piece of advice to heart, started implementing that in my turkey hunting strategies and turkey hunts, and it paid dividends. It was huge. So the second piece of advice that I got, I actually got it from the same guy who has been on the show a few times. It's my buddy Chip. And we go on this out-of-state turkey hunt every year together. We typically will turkey hunt 2 or 3 or 4 times a year together. He lives over in West Alabama, so I don't see him as often as I used to when he lived in Birmingham or when we were in Tuscaloosa together. But that piece of advice that I got from him was brought on by a question from me to him. And that was, how is it that when we're hunting together and it's your turn to call a turkey for me, how is it that you're getting the turkey to respond so much more than I am when I'm calling for you or for me or anybody else for that matter? What are you doing that is so different in your turkey calling than what I'm doing? And his answer was, I'm adding more realism to my calling than what you do. And he was right at the time, and he went on to explain it to me, and I'm going to tell you guys as part of the story what it is. But at the time, when I would call a turkey, and I'm using my natural voice, so don't laugh at me too hard, but I would yelp and I would go, meow, 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 meow. And there's no inflection in that. There's no feeling in that. There's no mood to it. So the way he explained that to me is, let's say you called a woman on the phone and said, hey, I'd like to take you out to dinner Friday. And she says, yeah, that'd be great. And I was thinking maybe after that, we could go, there's a new club that's opened downtown, or maybe we could go catch a movie. I don't know. We'll find something fun to do. We can go to catch a hockey game or something like that. Yeah, yeah, that'd be okay. Well, if you need to stay home and wash your hair, you can do that. And I'll just stay at my house and I won't have to spend any money on you. And it's that versus you calling a woman and saying, hey, you want to do something Friday? And the woman goes, oh my gosh, yes, I'd love to. What time? And what do I need to wear? What are we going to do? And that was the difference in his calling and mine. So when I would call, I'd yelp to a turkey. I'd get a response from the turkey with the gobbler saying, hey, I'm over here. And I'd go, okay, yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll come over there and, maybe I won't. I don't know. Maybe I need to wash my feathers. And he's telling that gobbler when he calls and the gobbler responds to him, he's telling that gobbler, oh my gosh, you are the sexiest hunk of turkey I have ever heard in my life. I have got to meet you. I want to know you. We're going to make beautiful turkey babies together. And that was the difference. So he's getting more responses because he's given more to the turkey than I was giving to the turkey in my calling. So where my calling was all monotone, had no inflection in it, his might be, some just a little bit more excitement into it, just to give that gobbler a little bit of extra something. And that doesn't mean you have to just lay it on so thick and so hot and so heavy and so long that you spook him, because that can definitely happen. But you just give him that extra little something, do something to get him more fired up so that he is more apt to step across that rock outcropping or to step across that ditch that might be between you and him that you don't see. And that was another thing that made a lot of difference to me. So when I got those two pieces of advice and combined that with actually going into the woods every single day that I could possibly go into the woods to hunt turkeys, even if I was driving an hour to hunt an hour, to turn around and drive back an hour, I was doing it. Those three things are what really pushed me to that point to where I was consistently killing turkeys year after year after year. That's a long answer to a great question.
It's a good one, though. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about my most successful turkey seasons. It's been the turkey seasons that I've had time to go consistently, jump in the truck,
That's it.
Go as many times as possible. And it's like, it increases your odds of getting it done.
Are you saying before you had a bunch of kids, Adam?
I'm not going to, that's a good question that I'm not going to answer.
Way to hang a buddy out on that one. Here's a lob. You want to hit it or not? So, that's it. You can't kill them if you're at the house. You can't kill them if you're not in the woods. And it's really what it boils down to. And I know there are so many things that demand our time, things and people and occasions and everything else that demand our time. But when it boils down to it, if we're getting up an hour and a half before daylight, as long as we don't have to be at work an hour and a half before daylight, but if we're getting up an hour and a half before daylight, there's usually a couple of hours of daylight that we have to spend doing something that we enjoy doing before we have to be at work. And so I literally, during the week, I have a couple of spots, and some of those are public land, that I turkey hunt that are within an hour of Birmingham. So I'll get up at 4:30 in the morning, jump in the shower, jump out of the shower, hopefully at least partially clean, throw on my clothes, jump in the truck, drive an hour. There are days when I will hunt an hour, which doesn't give you a lot of time after fly down. If you don't call that bird down off the roost and straight into you, there's a good chance that you're not going to kill him on some days that you don't have very much time to spend in the woods in the morning. And then I always take my clothes with me when I go hunting, my work clothes. They were sitting in the truck. So before I leave the woods, I throw my work clothes on and drive to the office or drive to my appointment or whatever it is that I've got to do. It's just a matter of making it work. If we're going to wait for it to work, it's never going to work. We have to make it work for us, and we have to get out there and spend the time in the woods and get after the birds.
I'm going to raise my hand and say I'm guilty of something here, and I think you might have just helped me out too. And that was either the second or third part of your answer about putting inflection in your calling. So I've heard a lot of different veteran turkey callers say, call less and call softer, which I think is really good advice. But what I've done in turn is probably made my yelps, my calling, more monotone, with less inflection, with less excitement, or with less emotion in it. And now I'm like raising my hand. I'm guilty as charged on those times where I'm like, okay, I'm going to be good today. I'm not going to get, because I'm be honest with you. If you run into me in the woods, you're going to probably say, dude, you're calling too much. I like to call. I know it's like, it's one of the things that I have to make myself stop doing. So every once in a while I'll back off. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to overcall this turkey. And I know now that I'm thinking about it, I'm probably not putting enough inflection into it. That's good stuff. I appreciate that.
Good. Yeah. No problem at all. And hopefully you'll send me a picture or two of some dead turkeys that you got because of that tip.
Yeah, I hope so.
And remember, the inflection does not necessarily mean higher volume. And so I just gave you inflection without giving you any higher volume. So you can mix those calls up without getting louder. And for those wary public land birds, that most of the time don't want that loud calling because they hear it every single day during turkey season from hunters walking around in the woods calling loudly, you can give them some inflection in your calls without making it twice as loud. Now, it's okay to do that. You know, if you call and a turkey gobbles, and I'll do this a lot of times, and this is one strategy or one tactic that I love, and I'm going to tell you what it is. I said I'm not going to tell you. I was going to say I'm not going to tell you and just leave it at that. But so
appreciate that.
So here it is. When I call and I get a turkey to respond, I will just about cut him off like he's tried to cut me off with his gobble. And I'll try to cut him off with a response. So if I'm, and he goes, oh, and if he gobbles again, I might hit him just a little bit more, and then I shut up. So I've just gotten him from 0 to 60 in about 3.2 seconds, and I've just shut up. So what in the world just happened? I mean, there's some woman over there just saying these obscene things to him, and all of a sudden she's just stopped and she's just disappeared. Something's wrong. Is she coming to me? Well, I'll hang around here for a minute and see. I don't see her, but my God, she sounded sexy, and she was nasty. I've got to go over there, and it really works, and it will work on public land birds. Just be careful when you fire back at him. If it's public land bird, my personal experience, and there are some very, very good turkey hunters who will tell you it doesn't matter if the turkey's fired up. You can be as loud as you want to be. That's not me. I don't do that. But I'm not going to tell you that I'm the only one who knows how to turkey hunt and the only one that knows how to kill turkeys, because I'm not. And I'm not the best turkey hunter out there either. So with that being said, on a public land bird, I'll give them that inflection without going up in volume. And it's a lot of it has to do with the timing as well. So you call, he gobbles, you give him another call, just immediately put a little inflection, a little feeling into it. And if he gobbles again and you want to give him one more, but don't do any more than that. If he responds again, just shut up and sit down and get ready. Or don't sit down, just get ready.
Let me ask you this. What if 5 minutes goes by and you hear hens with that gobbler and he's gobbling and you know maybe you can even see him out in the distance. Maybe you're hunting a field bird and you see that he's henned up, he's strutting. What do you do at that moment? Do you just still not call? What's your response?
So in my calling, have I gotten a hen to respond to me?
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay.
Let's say no at this point. In this certain situation,
okay. So
you're talking to this gobbler.
Okay. All right. So I see the turkey. He's out in the field.
Yep.
And he's by himself with hens, no other turkeys.
That'll work. Where I hunt, I have multiple gobblers, so you can come hunt with me if you want to.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to. I like multiple gobblers.
I need help killing them, so you can come on.
All right. Don't say it too many times. I'll come knock on your door at 3 a.m. and you'll be like, huh? You said come on. I'm here. Let's go. So if there's multiple gobblers, there's no question what I'm going to do at that point in time. I'm pulling out my fan, and I am going to do my very best to fan one or all of those gobblers into me and away from their hens. And they will leave their hens for a fight in a heartbeat. So if they're field turkeys, that's my next move. Otherwise, depending, and if there's multiple gobblers and hens, most likely that's early season, and I'm probably not very likely to call those gobblers away from their hens, but I might be able to get a subordinate bird to slip away and come to me if he thinks that I'm a hen. And so if they're gobbling, at that point, I'm probably going to continue to call. and I'm talking, again, private land. If we're going public land, we're talking about what I think is a different ball game altogether. I'm not even going to have my fan with me on public land. That's not even an option. Reaping or fanning.
Probably good thinking.
Good
yes. Yes. It's not going to happen.
Number one turkey hunting tip, don't fan on public land.
Yes, without a doubt. And be super careful with it on private land. But, we're all adults. Let's make that judgment call ourselves, and every situation is different. So anyway, that I'm likely on public land going to give those birds as much as I can get from them. You always hear hunters say, well, I just take their temperature. How do you know how much to call to a bird? Well, I take the bird's temperature. If I call and he answers, I'll call more. If I call and he answers, or I call and he doesn't answer, I call and he doesn't answer, I call and he doesn't answer, I know that bird's not real hot. So I would, on a public land bird in that situation, I'm going to try to get one of those subordinate birds to come into me, or if I can get one of those hens fired up, the boss hen, if I can get her fired up and coming into me, then I'll try that. If that doesn't work, my last resort is I'm figuring out where those birds are going next, and I'm getting between where they are and where they're going.
So for our beginner turkey hunters, can you tell me how you would get that hen fired up?
Yeah, that is such a tough topic right there to touch on, because we've had those days. If we've turkey hunted more than probably 2 days in our entire life, we've had those days to where it doesn't seem like you can do anything to get a turkey to talk. And I'm convinced that on most of those days when the birds aren't talking, we can't do anything to make a turkey talk. So sometimes the answer is nothing. That I seriously think that we can't do anything to get that hen to respond to us. But on other days, we can try to be a little bit bossy and a little bit snippy. I was trying to throw snippy and snappy in there at the same time. A little bit snippy. Yeah, that's right.
New term.
And get that dominant hen, boss hen, to say, okay, who is this other turkey that's coming into my territory that's challenging me? When I yelp, that other turkey yelps and is yelping louder and more aggressively. When I cut, that other turkey's cutting louder and more aggressively. That other turkey's challenging me. So if I'm trying to get that hen to get fired up and she's not really going to bring the flock by saying, hey, come with me. She's going to take care of some business to fight, and the rest of the flock is just following her because she's the boss. They follow her and do whatever it is that she does. So I'm going to try to do something to challenge her to where I get her fired up, and that could be just some aggressive cutting, some loud yelps, and again, it's got everything to do with your inflection when you're calling. I can yelp, and that's more of a soft and sweet yelp, or I can yelp. That's a little more short, a little more aggressive, a little more, what did I call it? Snappy. That's my new word, snappy.
Snappy.
Yeah. So things like that. And with the cutting, you can cut to her. Pop, 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 pop. And if she's not in the mood to put up with that, she'll respond. And you just got to keep feeding on that. Now, truth be told, that strategy of calling the whole flock by calling the hens to you doesn't work very consistently. You hear it a lot coming from experts, but I can tell you that personally, I might have had it happen 2 times in my entire turkey hunting career. It doesn't happen a whole lot, but it can happen. It does happen. And that's 2 times that it's happened that I've been able to kill a turkey because I've been able to get that entire flock or get that boss hen to come to me with the gobbler following her. And so try it. I mean, what do you really have to lose if you call too much? And I think that's part of the problem when we attempt that strategy, because we're told by the pros and the experts, when you call and you hear that boss hen off in the distance and she's responding to you, you imitate her, but you be louder, you be more aggressive. Well, she's going to get louder and more aggressive because she's sensing your challenge. Then you get louder and more aggressive, and you're just copying her calls. Most of the time, she's going to turn her and she's going to walk away and take that gobbler with her because she doesn't want any more additional competition for her man. And so it's easier to turn around and walk off than it is to walk on over across the hill and get into a fight with a strange turkey. So more often than not, that strategy doesn't work, but I still don't think we have a whole lot to lose by trying it because we're trying to get a gobbler away from a bunch of hens anyway. And unless we can morph into a hen, I don't think our odds of getting that done are very good.
And something that might actually happen for you as a lone gobbler somewhere else might come into this nonsense. So I've had that happen before.
That is very true. And that does happen. And I would say this, always be watching and paying attention, because a lot of times that satellite gobbler, that gobbler that's not the boss, that has a whole bunch of hens, is walking around in the woods quietly, and he's listening, and he knows not to gobble. Or you may just hear,
oh yeah,
and never hear that gobble. So keep your eyes open, keep your ears open when you are attempting that strategy, because Adam's dead on. That happens a fair amount. So good, very good. I'm glad you brought that up.
One of my favorite turkey hunts is that exact thing was going down. I was calling to a bunch of hens, and just like what you mentioned, I heard that spit and that drum, and I was behind this huge oak tree that hid me perfectly. This turkey is 5 yards behind me. So I kind of ease out behind that tree, and I can see his fan, just his fan's at me. So I pull my gun around the tree with one hand, and I just, I'm holding it there, waiting. He turns, I yelp a little bit. He turns around, sticks his head up, and I pull that trigger. My hand, I felt like it shattered, because that's all I had of that 12 gauge with a 3.5. But it was just like that. I mean, that bird snuck right in on me, had no clue he was there, spit and drummed, boom, let out a big gobble. I mean, it was just, it got my blood boiling. So
yeah,
it gets me ready to go turkey hunting.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are good times. I love reliving stuff like that.
Well, can you explain the 3 different phases of turkey seasons and how you call and use decoys as a strategy throughout each of those 3 seasons?
Yeah. So the first phase is that early season phase where you've got flocks of gobblers that are breaking up and teaming up with flocks of hens. And there's that whole dynamic in and of itself really kind of lends itself to what we as turkey hunters are trying to do. So you've got gobblers who have been hanging out with each other since, probably June, July, August, who've been best buddies for the past 6 months, who all of a sudden absolutely hate each other and want to kill each other. And we can catch those groups of gobblers some days when they're still bunched up, but they're fighting and starting to really kind of break away and separate and go their separate ways to find hens. And that's great timing because those birds don't have hens with them at that point in time. They're looking for love, and I can provide them with a amount of love at that point. A 12-gauge shotgun blast to the head, I think, is love. So what I'm going to do with calling, I am going to give them at that point what they want. Most likely, it's early season. They're thinking about love. They're pretty hot to trot and ready to go. And you can be pretty aggressive with those birds. You can also catch them in groups of 2 or 3 or 4 longbeards at a time. And if you can do that, if they don't have hens with them, you can be super aggressive. But if they do have hens with them, you can challenge them. A strutter decoy with a lone feeding hen, I don't like a standing or erect hen because to me it's like that bird's on watch. What's going on? Why is her head sticking up and she's just not moving? A feeding hen to me is more natural, and you can also double that decoy up as a breeder if you just take the stake off and lay that bird down on the ground and put your either Jake or Gobbler decoy right up against the rear end of that turkey. So that's a different setup altogether. But a strutter decoy or even a Jake decoy with a lone feeding hen, or if you want 2 feeding hens, that's fine. That is a great decoy setup for that time of year. You can also, at that time of year, reap or fan those gobblers pretty easily if it's the right place to do that. Because you think back to your high school days when you were out with your high school buddies and there were 3 or 4 of you guys running together. If one dude from a rival school comes over and starts trying to pick up on one of your buddy's girls, all of you are going to go after this one guy. And that's no different than what we're trying to present to those 3 or 4 gobblers that are out in the field with the hens. When we go out there with a strutter decoy, presenting it to them in a way that we're approaching their flock, or we go out there with just a fan in front of us and we're presenting it to them as we're approaching the flock as well. So that's a great strategy for that time in the season. And as far as calling goes, again, I'm going to give those birds at that point in time in the season, I'm going to give them what they want. If the birds are responding to me, it's early enough to where I don't feel like birds are call shy. I can give them more calling. Now, when we get to the middle part of the season, which for the past couple of years for me has been brutal in Alabama, I mean, just brutal, that I have always found is a tougher time of year, especially when we're like in Alabama, we're coming through a period of time now where we've had, in about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a period of time where we had some bad hatches. So our turkey population has been down, and that means we have fewer gobblers. And when you have fewer gobblers, they're going, well, I mean, it's just easy math. We've got fewer opportunities to go out and find a gobbling bird. So those birds are going to want to stay with those hens a little bit longer, as long as the hens will keep them. That middle part of the season, we can often have a lull in gobbling because, as we like to say in the South, those birds are henned up. And I'm not sure if you look in the dictionary if that's actually a real legitimate term like snappy is.
I'm pretty sure Handup's in there.
It is? Okay.
I'm pretty sure
All
it is.
Well, it would be before snappy then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those henned up gobblers, we all know if we spend any time with them, are a bear. They can be a bear to deal with because they don't have to gobble. They've got girls with them. Male turkeys gobble to bring in girl turkeys. There's no reason to make any noise. when they make noise, all they're doing is drawing attention to them from things that they don't need or want. Coyotes, bobcats, people. And so there's no reason to gobble. So that time of year is a tougher time of year. Typically, my strategy that time of year is to cover a lot more ground early in the mornings. Well, even up to mid-morning. Cover a lot of ground and try to find a turkey that wants to play. Maybe that gobbler's lost his hens. They've gotten separated by a coyote or a bobcat or a person. Or maybe that gobbler turned around to go beat up on a jake that started making his move towards the gobbler's flock, and the hens just left him and he hasn't been able to find them. So we can often go out and try to find those birds at that point. If we can catch a lonely bird during that time of the year, they can often be very vocal and very responsive to our calls. As that time of year really is kind of like, to me, has a beginning and an end to it, because the beginning of that phase, of that second phase of the season, that henned up phase, those birds, typically a gobbler will have, a flock of 4, 6, 12, 15 hens, and he absolutely has no reason to gobble because those hens are with him all day long. And if you've got a single gobbler with a flock of hens, I think that presents a very difficult challenge for us, especially trying to decoy. I think it presents a challenge to us in calling, because there's just not a whole lot that we're going to be able to do that's going to beat out a good-looking, hot young hen, live hen. So when we get into the middle and latter part of that middle part of the season, that henned up part of the season, a gobbler's more likely to have hens with him in the mornings. Then as the day wears on, the hens start to think about why they're with that gobbler to start with, and that is to have them a bunch of babies. So they're starting to think about nesting, and they'll start to drift off and look for that good nesting spot. They'll start to build their nest, which doesn't take them, most of them, long. And as that middle part of that season wears on, we can often catch a gobbler that is alone later in the morning, around lunchtime, or even in the afternoon, when he hasn't been alone in almost a month. And so if we can catch him when he's alone at that point in time, we stand a really good chance. I have a lot of luck, typically, I haven't the past 2 years, but I have a lot of luck that time of year, midday, and even lunchtime. And I've even gotten to where over the past two, 3, maybe 4 years, I'll make my lunch the night before I go out to hunt, and I'll stick my lunch in the back of my vest, and I'll sit down to eat in the woods, and I'll be listening the whole time that I'm there. Because you can just be sitting there, and at 11:30, a bird just fires off a gobble. Maybe he gobbles at a crow or an airplane or an owl that happens to be drunk and hooting mid-morning or late morning. And he just fires off a gobble. Well, if you can call to him and get him to respond, all of a sudden you might just have a flash hunt on your hands, and you might have to put your apple away for your dessert and grab your shotgun instead. So as that middle part of the season gets easing into the latter part of the season, the third phase of the season, which is when those hens are really all they're interested in is sitting on that nest. They're not at the point where they're sitting on the nest 24/7, because they'll still fly up at night most of the time during our hunting season. They're not at that point where they're sitting on the nest 24/7. So they'll still fly up at night, but then first thing in the morning, they'll come down, they'll eat, and they'll go sit on the nest. They're through laying eggs. their job at that point in time is to incubate those eggs. And so that's what their focus is. They are not focused at all on breeding at that point in time. And the gobblers will become very lonely and be very susceptible. Now, I've also, my experience is at that phase of the season is that those gobblers get less and less vocal over a period of days. What I mean by that is if you take a 7-day span in late season, you may have 3 days where the birds are 3 or 4 days out of those 7 where the birds are hot and they're gobbling. The other 3 or 4 days out of that 7, there's nothing going on. Whereas in the latter part of the second phase, those birds are gobbling pretty consistently, pretty much every day, weather depending and whatever other issues there are, or factors there are that cause a bird to gobble or not gobble. But those days when we can catch in late season, the third phase of season, those days when we can catch a bird that is hot, he's hot because he doesn't have any hens with him. And he wants a girl something terribly. So again, strategies for that, calling wise, we can be aggressive, even though it's late season. We can still get aggressive with that bird. If we call and he's just gobbling at everything that we're doing, we can continue to give that to him. A public land bird, I don't think you're going to get away with that, especially a southern public land bird. I don't think you're going to get away with that. I think that you're going to have to get him interested, and you're going to have to shut up, and then you're going to have to start scratching in the leaves. You're going to have to start, maybe you can do some soft purring, very soft clucks, but I would focus on things like scratching in the leaves. And, if you have some way to make a wing flap, maybe the hen's stretching her wings out and she's flapping a couple of times, just kind of stretching a little bit, working things out, working the kinks out. That kind of stuff on public land in late season will work better than trying to get real aggressive with a bird, in my experience. Decoying, a lot of times these late season birds, these gobblers will actually start to group back up. And so we can challenge them again, just like we did in early season. And we can challenge them with a strutter decoy, a jake decoy, or fanning or reaping, and have a lot of success with that. Calling wise, like I said, give them whatever it is that you feel like they can take at that point. There's going to be days when the birds are just going to be falling all over themselves and gobbling every breath, and we almost can't mess up a hunt. But my general go-to strategy with turkey calling is less is better. When he gobbles at one of my calls, he knows where I am. I really don't need to do anything else. But it's more fun to call a whole bunch and to get that turkey gobbling every breath and falling all over himself to come into us. That's more fun. But I typically will call. If he gobbles and responds to me, I'll give him a little bit of something extra, try to get him to gobble again. And most of the time at that point, I'll shut up and I'll wait. And I may wait 30 minutes before I even think about making another turkey call, just to see what he's going to do. So, I'm not real big on running around in the woods. Well, I can't even say running around, but I'm not real big on calling every single breath to a turkey that's gobbling to me every single breath. And I might miss out on a lot of gobbling action, but ultimately I'm there to fill a tag. And the more I make that turkey gobble by calling to him, the more likely he is to call in the real deal. And I'm going to lose that game almost every single time.
Mike, did you have any questions for Andy?
Yeah. I've been enjoying just listening to this and learning a lot. I'm pretty new to turkey hunting, so I got some newbie questions for you.
Okay.
when it comes to these phases, is it like the deer rut where it's going to be the same week every year, or does that change based on weather conditions? How do you judge, other than actually seeing the birds, what phase it's going to be in?
Man, I'm telling you guys, y'all are going to start writing questions for me. I'm going to let you know who I'm interviewing, and I'm just going to have y'all write questions. That's not even, Mike, that's not even a beginner question. That is a great question that I think a lot of intermediate hunters want to know as well. And the past 2 or 3 years, in not only in Alabama, but a lot of the states that I've been hunting in, we have not had that very defined 3 phases. It's all seemed to be kind of one phase, and that is the turkeys are either gobbling or they're not. And, I think that at least in the areas that I've been hunting in Alabama, and I know this to be, well, I don't know anything, but I suspect this to be the case in Georgia and a couple of other states that I went to over the past couple of years. I think that we've had a couple of good hatches over the past couple of years, which is great. We needed it. And so we've got a lot of first-year hens who don't know the program. They don't know that they're supposed to go lay an egg a day on a nest up to a certain point. When they're through laying eggs, go sit on that nest and incubate those eggs. And so a lot of these first-year hens, they're unsuccessful at nesting. Well, they know that they're supposed to be doing something. They just haven't quite figured it out. And so they end up staying with those gobblers all season long. And that gets to be extremely frustrating because we don't ever get that late season. The gobblers are by themselves with no company. They're lonely. They're looking for love. They're hot. They're gobbling every single breath kind of days. So over the past 2 or 3 years for me, I don't even know how to answer that question because it's not happened. There's been no way to define where the birds are. If you're hunting an area that has a lot of fields where you can actually see the birds, then that's a great way. That is a telltale way of knowing where they are in the season. If it's 1st of April and your season comes in 1st of April and you see one gobbler in a field with 12 or 15 hens, I would just about bet you the next morning you can go where that turkey roosted and you're not going to hear a turkey gobble. That tells me they're at the early stage of phase 2. If you go out there and there's 3 gobblers by themselves on April the 1st on one end of the field, and then at the other end of the field, here comes a flock of 8 or 10 or 12 hens, and there's no gobbler with them, which would be very unlikely at that point, then you're kind of in that phase 1 area. So being able to get a visual is huge. Otherwise, you're going to have to rely a lot on your ears. And my experience has been that early season, the hens are much more vocal than they are late season. And I mean that as a flock. So typically early season, you won't hear just one hen. You'll hear a flock of hens acting like turkeys act early in the mornings. They'll be calling back and forth to each other, letting each other know where they are. That they're thinking about flying down. Oh, no, I'm too scared. I'm going to wait a minute. Oh, okay, you go. No, I'll go. No, wait, you go. They're going to be talking to each other. They're going to be very vocal. And a lot of times that gobbler that's with them, he'll gobble just because he can't help it. But, that's kind of a good sign that you're dealing with a flock of turkeys, a gobbler that's henned up. And you may not hear him gobble at all, but there's a really good chance if you're hearing those hens that there's a gobbler there. So you just have to rely on your ears more when you hunt areas that don't have a lot of openings or fields where you can sit and watch birds.
How site specific are the phases? So can I drive to a neighbor's field that's five miles down the road and see what the birds are doing there, and then drive back to my hunting property, and it should be the same, or is it going to be a totally different scenario?
It should pretty much be the same, especially in the South. You go to areas out west, and 5 miles is probably still enough to say, okay, they're in the same phase. But when you're talking about elevation changes and snowfall changes and things like that, I mean, you can go, out west and not be in snow at one spot, drive 5 miles, and they might have a foot of snow on the ground. So, I would say in the South, Southeast, it's going to be a pretty sure bet that whatever's happening on your buddy's place 5 miles away, that's happening on your place. And so, if you are watching birds there, it's a pretty good bet that they're going to be doing the same thing at your place.
All right. Earlier on, you mentioned hunting just about every day of the season, and immediately a couple questions came to my mind. The first one is, where are you hunting that you're able to hunt that often? I'm sure you've hinted at some different places. Can you kind of walk through in a typical season all the different places you might hunt? I guess mostly I know you're doing out-of-state hunts as well, but maybe just in your local area without going out of state. What are the different areas and places that you personally are hunting?
You mean like
I don't need
specifically
geography.
what areas?
No, I'm not asking
Okay.
for spots. I do. I might be new to turkey hunting, but I'm not new to hunting.
We're going to need
Yeah.
GPS coordinates,
Yeah.
Andy. And if you,
I just mean like, I've got a lease and I've got some family land and
I got
how do you break your season up?
Yeah, I was about to say, Mike, I like you,
Yeah.
and I really don't want to lie to you this early on in our podcasting relationship, but I will lie to you. So that's a good question. So I have a hunting camp that I'm a member of in Southwest Alabama, and it's about 30 miles south of Selma, so in the Black Belt. Historically, the turkey hunting has been phenomenal there. And that's really where I cut my teeth in turkey hunting, and should have killed 100 more birds than I have killed down there because I didn't have a clue what I was doing down there when I first started out. So I messed up a lot of hunts, but we'll say that's hunting club number one. I've got a hunting club that I'm in that is 50 minutes from my house. There is one piece of public land that's about 45 minutes from my house that I actually don't like to hunt because it is so highly pressured. Even during the week, it's got pickup trucks and hunters everywhere. And I'm all for a challenge in hunting a bird that's difficult, but I don't want to make it more difficult on myself if I have a choice. So there's another piece of public land that I like that is actually it's an hour and 5 minutes from my house. And I'll go there during the week. There's another piece of public land that is about an hour and 15 minutes, the complete opposite direction from my house, that's got some pretty good turkey hunting on it, that's not as pressured during the week. And I like to hunt the public lands during the week. And my tip about hunting public land is that Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and sometimes on Fridays those are really good days to hunt public land because you're typically not going to have a lot of pressure, a lot of competition from other hunters, and the birds have kind of calmed down from that mad rush of hunters that they see and hear on Friday mornings, Saturday mornings, and Sunday mornings. So Monday, they're still a little bit nervous. Tuesday, they're starting to calm down. Wednesday and Thursday, they're getting more into their normal routine before the loud trucks start rolling in on Friday morning, Saturday morning, and Sunday morning. So I like to hunt public land on those days during the middle of the week. The private land or the clubs, typically I hunt those on the weekend, so I'm not another hunter in the woods on those public lands during those days. And that's usually kind of how that breaks out for me.
Okay. My other question about hunting that often is, how choosy are you being with the birds you take? Is it 5 tags you get in Alabama?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you kind of hanging on to a couple of those tags near the end, waiting for the right bird, or are you basically taking the 5, best opportunities you get as soon as you get them, and then you run out of state or something?
I'm going to squeeze the trigger on every turkey that I get the opportunity to squeeze the trigger on when I get the chance to squeeze it. So there have been years when I've been limited out the first week in April. There was one year when I should have been limited out on the 3rd of April, but I missed and didn't kill the bird until I think 2 or 3 days later. And all I did from that point, I didn't hunt every day, and I wasn't hunting. So I guess let me go back and clarify that. I still went out even during the week and by myself, again, not every day, but I'd take a camera with me. And then on the weekends, and it would make my buddies mad, but I'd go out with my buddies and I would call for them and not take a gun. And they're like, "Why don't you take a gun?" "I don't need a gun." "Well, but you need to take one." "No, if I take one, I'll be tempted to shoot a turkey, first of all, and I don't need that. There's no reason for me to. I've killed 5. That's plenty." "Well, what if you see a coyote or a bobcat?" "Well, you've got a gun and you can shoot the coyote or bobcat. I'm not carrying the gun. I'm going to lighten my load by about 10 pounds and not carry a shotgun." And so I enjoy that because I enjoy sharing the sport with other people. And that gives me an opportunity to either take people out who've not been turkey hunting, or some people who have been turkey hunting but have not had any success or even heard a turkey gobble. So that gives me opportunities to get out there with others and either introduce them, reintroduce them, or help them out. I've got some buddies who are great turkey hunters who just don't get the time to go out like they did 10, 15 years ago before kids. And so when I get the opportunity to go with them, I want them to shoot. I can always go Monday if I haven't filled all my tags, but on Saturday, they can shoot. So I'm not choosy. I'm going to shoot any turkey I get the chance to shoot when I get the chance to shoot it. And I'm not, and as I get older, as I'm getting older, I'm less and less concerned with shooting 5 in a season. I'm to that point to where I enjoy going, and I would just as soon take somebody and let them have my gun to shoot a turkey as I would go by myself and shoot that bird myself. So, last year I couldn't have killed 5 if I'd gotten the chance. Trying to think here. So last year's the worst year I've had in maybe 15 years. And I killed 2 in Alabama, missed 1 in Alabama. And I'm trying to think. I don't believe I even called in another turkey for anyone that I hunted with. The year before that, I think I killed 3 birds in Alabama, but I called in, I think 4 or 5 more, and saw, I can't even remember now. I'd have to think about it. Several more die on out-of-state trips. So, if I'm getting the chance to see 8, 10, 12 turkeys die in a season, I'm tickled. I'm happy. That is a great year. Last year was way down. Hopefully this year won't be that way, but And it doesn't have to be me squeezing the trigger on them. So I'm giving you a long roundabout answer when I could have just said, no, I'm not picky.
That's what podcasting's all about, though. Wouldn't be much of a podcast with a bunch of yes or no answers. So
it's like talking to my teenage nephew. How's school?
Right.
Good.
I've got one last question for you as a newbie. What should I do? This is hypothetically speaking, because there's probably no way this is going to happen. But what should I do if I get busted during the season? Let's say I'm calling one in and he catches me moving, or I make a crazy sound or something like that. What's the best move once you get busted by it, Tom?
Okay, so you touched on something in your question that I think that, especially for beginner turkey hunters, but it even happens for us experienced hunters, and that is making a funny sound. So a turkey doesn't associate that funny sound with danger necessarily. So I think you're much less likely to scare one off with A being one funny sound. Now, if you made 100 funny sounds and that was supposed to be you making a turkey yelp, then yeah, I think there's a good chance you may scare one off that way. Our calling does not have to be perfect. We don't have to sound like Matt Van Cise or Chris Parrish or Preston Pittman or any of those guys who are competitive world champion turkey callers. We don't even have to remotely be in the same ballpark with them in terms of our calling ability. So if we're running a series of yelps and we mess up, leave it. End it on that. Hens mess up. Our voices crack when we talk. Mine's cracked, I think, 3 times. I made up a new word, sneappy or sneappy. So
our listeners are very well aware of voice cracking.
Okay, there you go. So that happens. Don't call more to try to compensate for a mistake that you've made in your calling. So don't worry about that. All right. So the moving part of it, man, there's some variables there. So, all right, if a turkey, let me answer the question this way. My experience, my observation in watching turkeys is that at a distance, you're much more likely to get away with movement than you are up close. And that's not for the obvious reason. The obvious reason is you say, well, at a distance, the turkey's less likely to even see you move. And that's true. But at a distance, you're not perceived to be an immediate danger or an immediate threat. At 5 feet, you're perceived to be an immediate threat. And their instinct is flight. They're going to run or fly to get away. I don't believe that when a flock of turkeys comes through the woods and one of them all of a sudden jumps back 5 feet because it got scared about something, I don't think the other turkeys laugh and make fun of it if that one turkey got scared of nothing. So their instinct is to get scared, retreat, try to process what that danger is, how much of a danger is it, how immediate of a danger is it, and then go from there. So if it's a sudden drastic movement at a reasonable distance to where you would have a bird coming into range of your gun or your bow, then yeah, you're likely going to scare that bird off to where he's not going to come back in right away. But that doesn't mean that you can't let him ease off, make note of the direction that the turkey's going. In your head, try to process where is that turkey going, and then either trying to get to that point before him or get between that point in front of him and just introduce a few soft calls. Soft calling could be soft yelps, some clucks, some purrs, some scratching in the leaves, and don't be expecting a hunt where a turkey's going to be gobbling his brains out coming in. He may gobble once, twice, but he's just been spooked. I'm not going to say scared. He's just been spooked a little bit, and he's probably not going to be terribly vocal. So you might just hear that, which still just makes my heart skip about 4 beats. I absolutely love that sound. But just be looking and listening for a turkey. So I told the story on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. I had my buddy Todd, my turkey hunting buddy Todd, with me. Todd and I really started turkey hunting hard together about the same period of time. And we turkey hunted together every single weekend during turkey season at my hunting camp. And 2 years ago, I went with Todd to his hunting camp. I'm going to shorten the story because we're long on time here for you guys. We called in 2 gobblers, and Todd says to me, shoot the one in the front. After you shoot, I'll shoot the one in the back. I said, okay. The turkeys come in. I shoot. I see my turkey take off running in the woods. Todd shoots, and his turkey takes off running and then starts to fly off. Or doesn't start to fly off. He does fly off. Well, we both thought that we had missed. Actually, my turkey ran about 10 steps and fell over. First time I've ever had that happen. His turkey was a clean miss. He didn't even cut a feather on his bird. About 30 minutes after we shot, the turkey that he missed started gobbling again about maybe half a mile from us. And I called and he gobbled. And I called and he gobbled. That turkey, we ended up killing that turkey. Todd ended up killing that turkey. That turkey gobbled probably 75 times after Todd shot at him and missed. You don't ever know how they're going to react. And I just don't think it's unusual for a turkey to be scared, to get scared. I think it happens to them multiple times a day. So they get scared and they get over it. We have this mindset that once we scare them, our hunt's over. We may as well go home. And that's not always the case. So if you do spook a bird, hang out there with that bird, or go, if you've got some land to cover, go make your route. But come back to that spot. Come back to that area. Not necessarily that spot, that exact same spot where you were sitting where you scared the bird, but come back to that area and check that bird again before you leave to go to lunch or to go home. Because that gobbler that you spooked may have already forgotten about what happened and be lonely and looking for love.
Andy, this has been like a crash course or maybe a refresher for turkey hunting for me. It's got me fired up, and I'm ready for spring to get here. I just want to say thank you for coming on our podcast, and I'd like to give you a minute to tell the listeners where they can find you and where they can listen to your podcast.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate you and Mike having me on today. You know, man, I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, and I love talking about it. Obviously, I have a podcast on it, so, you know, I talk about it way more than my wife thinks I should. But the Turkey Hunter podcast can be found on really any podcast player out there, any podcast player app. So it's on iTunes, it's on Google Play Music. You can find it on Podbean, on Stitcher Radio. Most all of the big podcast player apps you can find the podcast on. Now, what I've started doing about a year ago is, in lieu of having sponsors or advertisers on my show, and I've got a couple of reasons as to why I do this, but we won't get into that right now. But in lieu of having sponsors or advertisers, I have gone to a format to where I have a free portion of my weekly podcast episode, and then I have what I call a premium podcast episode. The premium podcast episode is normally about twice as long as the free version of the podcast. So The free version can be picked up on any of the major podcast player applications. The premium version of the Turkey Hunter podcast can only be found on the Podbean app. And you can actually, if anybody's interested in signing up for that, I would just say, go listen to a free episode or two. And at the end of every free episode, I tell people how they can subscribe to the premium content so that they can get the entire episode. And, I'm excited. We've got the NWTF banquet coming up, or convention coming up, I should say, in Nashville here in a couple of weeks. I'm stoked about that. I usually come away from that show with about, 6 or 8 weeks of content. I am hopeful that I can get in front of some folks that I have not had on the show before and have some new guests on there. And I always love to circle back around with the men and women that I've had on the show before and visit with them and try to get them back on as well. So there's some great content that'll be coming up. If you've got any listeners who want to learn more about turkey hunting, I'd be flattered and honored if they want to listen to an episode or two. And, I'm always open to feedback on the show. I'm going to say this on your podcast, and I will never get to the level of questioning that you guys have gotten to with me on this show. So, all I can say is I'm trying.
You don't have to flatter the host. We're already letting you talk about the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm trying to bring the best podcast that's out there in the hunting realm, period. But I can't do that without hearing from the people who are listening to the show, and me working for myself and I'm laughing when I say this because this is not the way I described it before the recording started when we were talking. But when I'm working my 9-to-5 job, I work for myself. And so I have to get input from my clients. If I'm not doing something right, I need to know. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Tell me what you don't like so I can fix it and I can move on. If you don't tell me what you don't like, I can never fix it and I can never improve. If I don't know what I'm not doing right on my podcast, I can never improve. And I always want to improve. We all want to improve on what we do. So I always love to hear from listeners, whether they're new listeners or old listeners, whether it's topic ideas or suggestions, or, hey, I'd love for you to get, John Doe.
Adam Cruz.
I'd love for you to have Adam Cruz on the show.
No one's going to learn anything except all the mistakes, and I keep a journal of them, so maybe I might be a good one.
That might be a great topic. Absolutely. So I encourage anyone who's listening, if they listen to an episode or two, shoot me an email, and I don't mind sharing the email address. It's andy@iamturkeyhunting.com. iamturkeyhunting.com. So I love to hear from people, and I love, like I know you guys are as well. You love to see pictures of your listeners with deer and turkeys and elk and fish, whatever it is that makes them happy. I love seeing those pictures of people with their turkey trophies.
Absolutely.
And when they send me an email with a picture of a turkey and they say, hey, this was my first turkey, and I want to thank you because I learned so much on your show. I feel like you had something to do with this. Man, I get super stoked about that.
And you're on social media as well?
I am. So I am, true confession time, I am poor on Facebook. What I mean by that is if you message me on my Facebook fan page, you may not get another message back from me for what has sometimes been a couple of weeks, but I will respond. I just don't check Facebook as often as I'm on Twitter. So on Facebook, it's www.facebook.com/IamTurkeyHunting. On Twitter, my handle is @TurkeyHitman. So that's HITMAN, @TurkeyHitman. And on Instagram, I may mess this one up. And if I do, I can tell you how to find me. But I think it's the Turkey Hunter Podcast on Instagram. And if that doesn't get you to find me, then I know you can just go search the Turkey Hunter Podcast and it'll come up that way. So
we'll post a link in the show notes.
Yeah, and you got it right. I just checked it while you're talking. The Turkey Hunter Podcast.
Great. Yeah. My wife set that one up for me, and because I didn't set it up, I have a hard time remembering what that handle is, but it's the name of the podcast. I should be able to remember that, shouldn't I?
I struggle with mine every time. No worries.
Understood.
We screw it up pretty much every time.
Yes,
so
we
yeah.
do.
I can totally relate, so I'm with you.
Well, Andy, thanks again. We truly appreciate it. I know we both enjoyed it, and all the listeners out there, definitely go check Andy and his podcast out.
Thank you guys again. I really do appreciate you having me on, and I'm sorry to ramble on so much about turkeys, but I get fired up about it. So, hey, I wish you guys a bunch of luck this season, and don't forget to send me pictures of you with your dead turkeys this year. Mike, I'm fully expecting to see your first bird on the ground.
Oh, absolutely.
Good.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. Y'all have a great night.
You too.